Welcome back to Ask the Educator, a podcast for all professionals involved in medical device processing and sponsored by Healthmark Industries. The education team here at Healthmark has 280 years of combined experience in areas ranging from sterile processing, endoscopy, OR, biomed, to hospital and industry leadership. Our goal is to leverage our collective experience to answer one of your questions each episode, giving you the practical tips you need to succeed in the evolving world of device processing. My name is Kevin Anderson, clinical educator here at Healthmark, and I will be your host. Let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome back to Ask the Educator. This is Kevin Anderson, your host, and for this episode, I have Stephen Kovach back with me, and I'm really excited to continue this series on unsung heroes of the SPD department. And for this particular episode, we are going to talk a little bit about heat sealers for peel pouches. So a piece of equipment that sits probably somewhere in the corner of your department, doesn't get a whole lot of thought, but is a very critical component to the department. So Steve, what do you have to say to get us kicked off here about the heat sealer?
Well, I think this is another really vital piece of instrument that we don't pay a lot of attention to, and there's a lot of guidance on what we should be doing. So I want to start this way, Kevin. Again, I know it's been a while since I've been a manager, but we all go in a lot of departments, and I want to just do a quick, there's basically two types of heat sealers: the push bar that you push and it goes, and then a roto sealer where you go and it gives a continuous seal. The roto sealer is really used a lot in manufacturing. If you go to manufacturing plants, that's really the industry standard for rolling and doing the type of seals. And with that, I grew up on the push bar. I grew up on where they were just numbers 0 through 9. And if it didn't seal, you turned up the heat, and then you burned the filament out, and you'd call biomed, and maybe it'd take them a week to come change the filament, and you were doing pouches, and you didn't know, and they burst, and you didn't know why. And come and lo and behold, as I now have found out, it's a seal. And these pieces of equipment, they fail, and you have to ensure that they're working all the time. And it's been neglected, this heat sealer, and you want to make sure it's functioning properly, because a proper seal will allow the pouch to provide a sterile barrier. And if not, you've got problems. And you don't know unless you really look, like even with a magnifying glass, there's micro little rivers, I call them. So I'm glad you're bringing this one up, Kevin. I know you had a heat sealer, and I'm going to put you on the spot. I know that you had a great quality management program for it, and biomed checked it in, and right? Is that correct? Or did I? You don't want to answer that. Take the fifth.
Yeah, I'm going to take the fifth and redirect. No,
okay.
Actually, I will talk a little bit to it. I am familiar with how to verify that your machine is working. And we actually did have our in-service from you guys while I was there on how to check our heat sealer. Did we get it all the way off the ground and get it instituted into our daily procedure for a quality check? No, we didn't get that far. However, I will speak to real briefly how important it is, because as a former end user in the operating room, I can tell you we've gone through situations where there were runs of times where you'd go and you'd grab a peel pouch item and the seal looked good, but then when you went to open it, it was already opened and you knew the contents weren't sterile at that point. And then there were other times where it was sort of, the seal was so weak that you were starting to second guess whether or not it was sealed at all.
Yeah.
And so you weren't sure. And now you're like trying to find another replacement for that peel pouch item. And so one thing I learned about is I went down into SPD when I was the OR nurse to find out what was going on from our lead technician at the time. And, you know, he was showing me the piece of equipment and how it's done. And it's really quite simple, but The problem is if you don't change the temperature, depending on which pack you're using, whether it's
Yeah.
Tyvek or the steam one, paper plastic one, you could end up with seal problems, or the machine's not performing to its standard, and, the seal's not
Mhm.
as strong. And
Yeah.
so there's definitely maintenance involved and quality checks involved that need to be done. Obviously, even training too. So yeah, I've definitely had my share of experience with poor seals on
Well,
peel pouches, unfortunately.
let's try to give people some direction on to decrease that from happening. So I believe to ensure a good heat sealer is working properly, you need a QMS, quality management system, IQ, OQ, PQ. So we're going to make this part up. You just bought a new heat sealer. When it comes in, you should get your biomed department or technology management to come in and do the IQ and the OQ. And part of that OQ will be the tests that you'll eventually use, and to understand the preventive maintenance to ensure it's working properly, and to find independent testing to allow you to verify that the sealer is really sealing properly, whether it's Tyvek or non-Tyvek pouches. So people say, well, you're just trying to sell us a product or whatever. No, we're trying to sell you quality. And so here's where the documentation is to do it. First of all, majority of facilities are Joint Commission, and Joint Commission has this standard, and it's been around for over 40 years, where medical equipment should be tested and maintained, and they should be inventoried. It's EC 6.20. So your heat sealer gets an emblem from that it's a piece of medical equipment. So there must be a way to test it and do it. This is used every day, like your sterilizer, like your washer. So it should be verified every day. So if you look in AAMI ST 79, they have a section on packaging and making sure integrity in that is there. If you look at ST90, it gives you that you should put in programs for equipment you have. And then we have a document, TIR 22, which deals with pill pouches and sterile barriers and so on. And that also goes into what's happening, because that dovetails into the ISO document 11607. And that document now is what they use in Europe and everywhere else. And they do daily testing. And then within there, you have ASTM standards, which talk about a dye test. So there is enough information and guidelines to help you do it. And you can even go back to Joint Commission and look in the IC standards. I think it's 2.2.1, which requires hospital to reduce risk of infections associated with the medical equipment and devices. So here's a piece of equipment. You've got to seal pouches right. How do you make sure whichever one you're using is sealing properly? You test it every day. So you find the tests that you could do to do this, and you record it and do it. I'm trying to show all the documents that say if you're not doing it, you really should. Will an auditor ask you? Probably not, unless you have some incident reports where you had failed pouches and sterility, and then you have to go back and do it. But even though now, Kevin, you're not the manager, and I know you're going to put it in, doesn't it make some sense that there is support for you to do something to make sure this piece of equipment works properly, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think part of the problem regarding testing a heat sealer is simply having the awareness, and also people really growing their quality management system. I think we need to have a robust quality management system,
Mm-hmm.
not a reactive one. We need to learn about our equipment. We need to test it. We need to know when things are wrong before the OR has to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I absolutely think people need to know about these standards that support them, whether it's an ISO or an ASTM or a joint commission, but they also need to know how to do it,
Yeah.
why it's important. You know, I'll tell you, when you're in the operating room and something comes up during a case and the doctor's dealing with unexpected bleeding and he asks you to go grab this clamp or a clip applier that's in a peel pouch, you don't have time to go back and get another one. You need to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you have the equipment when you need it and it's presented sterile. You can't
Yeah.
deal with bad peel pouches. It has to be ready to go when you need it. And time is of the essence. And I'll tell you, from that former end user standpoint, is I wish at that point we had a better quality management system for our peel pouches. So I think this is a great topic. And I hope that, the audience is kind of, getting some awareness around this, because I
Yeah.
really don't think people really know about it.
Yeah. And what it is, there's this ink pouch test. It's a dye and it's a penetration test. And many companies sell it. We're one, and that's something, if people want to know, call us or we can come help them with. But we just, have to remember, heat sealers fail. You want to verify the process. You want to do it according to your standards. But you said something, you want your staff to understand why. And the why is the story you've just told about being in the end user's spot. They don't want to have a doubt that it wasn't sealed right or it wasn't sterilized right or the indicator didn't turn. I mean, there's a whole lot of other things. But like you're saying, if you just sort of open the pouch and it's too easy, you're going, wait a minute, what's going on here? And I think, as you said, the times are changing. I see it. You just say it. You want it robust. You want to put in quality improvement or whatever you want to call it, lean, but quality needs to be used to improve what you're doing. In this case, your peel pouching process and the integrity. You should be able to find process verification products that can test the functionality of your heat sealer for integrity, but also self-seal pouches and showing people how to open it. We've got to learn new terms and we've got to document our results, but it's something simple that, like you say, it's sitting there. Do you really know it's working the way it should? And it can just take a minute or two every day of doing this dye test. Say, you know what, it works. Let's record it, go from there. Or no, I got to turn the filament if it's an old type of push bar and maybe the temperature's off because now you got to read the temperature because, a heat sealer works on temperature, dwell time, and in the pressure. So again, it's just to make people aware and might be simple, but it's something I hope people start looking at. So that's all I have to say. I know it's might be one of our quickest podcasts, but it's a simple topic of quality and doing something and implementing it, right?
Absolutely. And it's like I said in the beginning, I think unfortunately it's a little bit of an overlooked piece of equipment, but it's a critical one nonetheless. I mean, you're dealing with sterile barrier systems here, and that is a foundational piece to infection control in the operating room. So I just want to thank you, Steve, for sharing this idea. And I just love it. I hope that our audience really at least starts to think about
Yeah.
this, because we need to have our eyes opened a little bit about some of these pieces of equipment that are bound to fail at some point, and we need to know more about that. Even though we're not all clinical engineers, that doesn't mean we don't need to know our equipment. We need to know it, and we need to know that it's working every day. So
Kevin, before you close off, I just thought of something. You were an OR nurse. Wouldn't it be nice that once the department put this together, they bring either the OR leadership or the head nurses for the different services and come down and say, look, here's something we've done quality. We want you to rest assured as best as possible that our pouches work. Here's why we're doing it. Here's what we do every day. So when you open that pouch, you've got a good seal from us. I mean, that's the other piece. We've got to let our customer know some of the things we're doing to ensure they're getting the best product. And I just wanted to call because you were an OR nurse and you came down. So now we got to go up and get your confidence back, Kevin. I just thought of that. I'm sort of airheadish. So
no, Steve, that's a great point, and I like to bring that up in some of my talks, like the building an OR SPD relationship. I think communication is key because you're not usually in the same department. You don't know what each other's doing. So you got to manage that message and go up there and tell them what you're doing to manage quality and explain it to them so that they know that you care. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, a whole nother podcast even, and maybe even a whole nother series, to be honest with you. But I'm glad you brought it up. I think it's something that we need to think about routinely is how are we communicating what it is we're doing to maintain that quality in the OR. So
yeah, it is. And for us and as users, both on both ends, work with your manufacturer who makes your pouches, work with them to get the right temperature. I know for us, it's WePack's Dairy King. We give the people the right temperature. We try to give them in services. How does it open? Thumb tab. So again, it's not only working with us as a company, but our distributor and who makes the pouch and how strong the pouch is and film and all that. It's a lot right there. And here I said it was going to be quick and my mind started going on another tangent. So I better stop right there, Kevin. But thank you for at least opening up this discussion on heat sealing and seals and testing and the importance of it. Thanks, my friend, as always.
All right, just to recap this episode, I spoke with Stephen Kovach about another unsung hero of SPD, the heat sealer. This device helps to ensure peel pouch items are safely secured in their sterile barrier and ready for sterilization, transport, storage, and finally use in a surgical procedure. These devices use heat, contact time, and pressure in order to produce a quality seal, and some heat sealers may use a bar with a filament as well. These are all components that could fail at any given time, which is why we should be testing this equipment each day it is in use. Performance qualification, or PQ, of this equipment is supported by numerous standards and documents. So don't wait for the unlikely scenario of a surveyor to ask you about this equipment, or worse, for a problem to arise with your heat sealer. Be proactive and add a PQ test to your heat sealing device as a part of your quality management system. If you are interested in learning more or want to implement a quality check for your heat sealer, please reach out to your local HealthMark rep. And if you don't know your local rep, you can send any inquiries to our email address, asktheeducator@hmark.com, and we will get you connected. I want to thank you all for listening. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. All opinions expressed on this show are those of the presenters. Before using any medical device, it is important to review the device manufacturer's instructions for use.